I went there to talk about my life. I left thinking about her. And no matter how hard I tried to understand why, the only thing what my mind kept repeating was the way she had looked at me. As if I were the most important thing in the world because exactly 50 minutes. It wasn't love. I was sure of that. But then why couldn't I stop thinking about her? She said something at the end of the session. Something simple, almost automatic. And even so, I went to the car, I sat in the driver's seat and remained there for a full 7 minutes. Unable to start. If you've ever felt something you couldn't name for someone who you shouldn't, this video is for you. Subscribe here too. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to meet you. The office smelled of wood and something light. Floral, which I couldn't immediately identify. Lavender. Maybe. Or eucalyptus. Something that said, "You can breathe. Here." And I needed to believe that so badly that I sat down. Raw linen sofa and I let my shoulders sink in a way. Which I wouldn't allow myself anywhere. My life had been turned upside down in the last 3 years. Months. Divorce signed. Brand new apartment that still smelled. Fresh ink and the solitude of unopened boxes. A job that I loved but that suddenly didn't seem enough for. Fill the enormous space that had formed inside. Me. 35 years old and the feeling that I had. Starting all over again in a world that hadn't given me the chance. Manual. My friend Grace had been insistent. Go just once, Mara. Just to see. And I had agreed just so she would stop bothering me. Calling every night with that worried voice that it made me more anxious than anything else. She entered the office with a cup of tea in each hand. I brought one for you too if you want, chamomile, but no obligation. She sat down in the armchair on the other side of the low table, crossed. He moved his legs slowly and looked at me with an attention that I was used to receiving. Not judgmental, not anxious, just a gift. Then, she said, her voice deep and calm as a deep river. What brought you here? The whole thing, without the packaging. I spoke for 40 minutes without stopping. About the wedding that it slowly crumbled like wet paper. About fear. About having made the wrong decision, about waking up at 3 in the morning. This morning I felt like I had failed in some way, like some version of myself. Even though I didn't even know it existed. She didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped, I realized that the hands were cold around the cup and that my chest felt lighter than usual. That in months. And I also realized with a sense of unease that I couldn't name them because I didn't want those 50 minutes had come to an end. She had this way of listening that I had never encountered before. In no one. It wasn't just about staying quiet while I talked. It was something else. It was as if her entire body was turned towards me. Not in an invasive way, not too intensely, but a way of saying, I'm here, you don't need to. In a hurry. I'm not going anywhere. And that, somehow, it was the most terrifying and most comforting thing that someone could do it. I found myself observing her hands, long with rings. Discreet markings on the fingers of the right hand. Short nails without nail polish. She held her own notepad in her lap, but rarely. She was writing. She just kept looking at me. You've said several times that you feel responsible, she said. At a certain point, slowly, like someone choosing each. The word was spoken before putting it on the air. Responsible for the termination. Because of his pain. Because of his own confusion. She paused. Which lasted exactly the right amount of time. But at no point. You said you feel responsible for your own peace. I didn't know how to answer. I just stared at her. You don't need to answer now, she said, and the corner of her mouth. Hers broke into a small smile. Not a triumphant one. Of welcoming. That smile stayed with me. While I was talking about other things. The move to a new city. What I was planning, the tense relationship with my mother, the nights when the silence of the apartment seemed to have texture. I was surprised to find myself returning to that smile in the corner of her mouth. Memory, like someone returning to a song they can't to quit. She smelled of something I wouldn't know how to describe if I tried. All I know is that when the air in the office moved, I breathed a little deeper. At the end of the session, she looked at her wristwatch analog. Golden, old, and he said that our time was ending. But before getting up, she paused for a second. She kept looking at me as if she wanted to make sure that I was fine. Not in a perfunctory way, in a real way. "How are you feeling right now?" she asked. "Different," I said, because it was the only true word that I had. She nodded as if she knew exactly what I meant. And I wondered, as I picked up my bag from the floor, what does it mean when a stranger understands you better than the people who have known you for years? In the elevator going down from the 4th floor, I kept looking at. I saw a distorted reflection in the metal door and tried to recognize myself. I couldn't do it properly. There was something different about my own face, a relaxation in the jaw muscles, a lightness around the eyes, which made me realize how much I had been constrained without to know. For weeks, for months, maybe for years. And as I walked through the building's lobby and pushed the glass door to the cold November air in Chicago, the first, all my mind did was go back to her. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that I understood. Only that gentle, persistent turning that the mind makes when something was left incomplete, like a door ajar. The wind keeps shaking. I sat in the car and didn't start the engine. I stared at the windshield through the thin mist. It started to fall and I tried to understand what was happening. It was probably gratitude. It was relief at having spoken to me out loud, things I had kept silent for so long. It was the natural effect of a good session of therapy. It had a simple explanation, but then I remembered her smile. And the way I had said my name, Mara, only once during the session, when I had come close to crying but held back. Through the tears, she had simply said, "Mara, everything's fine. It's okay to leave." Thus, seen, received, secure. I knew all of that. Even so, when I finally started the car and left in the parking lot, I found myself thinking about the texture of her voice. Deep but with an inherent sweetness, like old leather and honey. I found myself thinking about her attention as if it were a thing. Physical object that someone had placed over me like a blanket. I found myself thinking about her. And then I found myself wondering why I was thinking about her. That second question scared me even more than the first. I had scheduled the return visit for 2 weeks later. Standard, protocol. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the following week on Tuesday, while I was in the middle of a team meeting that wasn't demanding anything of me, no real attention, my mind went back to. I went to the doctor's office without warning. It wasn't me who went. She simply appeared. The image was specific. Her in profile looking out the window. For a second, while I organized my thoughts, the gray light of November hitting the side of her face on the rim of the glasses that she had put back on before I left. A second casual note that I didn't even know I had saved until to appear before me with that strange clarity of the memories that matter more than we think. I shook myself off. I went back to the meeting. I jotted something down in my notebook. Just to seem like I'm here. That night, sitting on the floor of my apartment with a glass of red wine, and the city of Chicago sparkling outside, through the panoramic window, which was the only thing I loved. Honestly, in that new place, I tried to ask myself, honesty, what was happening? I was lonely. That was a fact. The separation had torn apart an entire web of relationships, along with the marriage, mutual friends who had chosen sides, dinners that no longer exist, weekends that used to. They once had form and now they were just open, empty time. That was it. It was just loneliness, recognizing a gentle presence and clinging to it like someone drowning grabs anything. that floats. I believed that until the moment I picked up my cell phone. I opened the clinic's website and searched for her name. Dr. Ellen Marsh, clinical psychologist, specializing in life transitions, grief, relationships, and identity. There was a small photo on the profile, the same woman, a direct and calm gaze. The same something I couldn't name. I stared at the photo for too long. I closed the website. I put my phone down. I drank the wine, and then I picked up my phone again. The second session arrived on a cold Thursday in November, with that fine snow that Chicago throws in the air before, to decide whether it will actually snow or not. I arrived 5 minutes early. I stayed in the waiting room, staring at the small aquarium on the shelf and trying to breathe. At the right pace, normal, that was normal, I was coming back. I went to therapy because it was good for me. Period. When the door opened and she appeared, my body reacted. Before my mind. Not in a visible way. Not in a way that anyone could see. But there was a second, exactly 1 second, when my chest tightened in a way I hadn't allowed. Mara, she said, and my name continued to echo in her mouth. Having that specific quality that I couldn't achieve, understand, come in. The session started normally. She asked about this week. I talked about work, about a difficult conversation with my mother that had happened over the weekend, about the nightmares returned on Wednesday night. And then she asked a question I wasn't expecting. How did you feel at the end of our last session? Lighter, I said. I felt seen. I knew from the way he would arrive 5 minutes early and use those 5 minutes to recalibrate myself, to remind myself of who I was, to put things into the right perspective before getting involved. In that office where the correct perspective insisted on, slipped through our fingers. Ellen, I had started thinking of her by her first name. Inside my head, what I knew was a sign of something. Ellen had this quality of filling the silence without occupying it. When I stopped in the middle, phrase because it had come too close to a truth that it was frightening. She didn't finish. She didn't hurry. She just stayed there. With the space open, like someone holding a door open for you. Decide if you want to enter. Something minor happened during the 5th session. I was talking about the night of my wedding. The fact is that it ended not the day of the signing but the actual night. That specific night 2 years prior, when I knew without. There was no doubt that something had ended. And while as I spoke, my voice faded until it almost disappeared, and I looked at the ground because it was easier. When I looked up, Ellen was looking at me with. It was an expression I had never seen on her before. It wasn't just professional. It had a different texture. Something that it went by too fast for me to be sure, but I felt it. Before processing. She looked away a fraction of a second before I did. And that deviation, that second and a half of something that wasn't protocol, it stuck to me for days. I shouldn't have noticed. I did notice. And the worst part, she knew I had noticed. I saw it in the way she looked at me, as she adjusted her posture and returned to her therapist-like voice, with a level of care that wasn't there before. The office got a degree warmer after that. Neither of them said anything. There was real snow in Chicago on the 7th Thursday. That heavy, quiet snow that stifles the world and makes everything to seem slower, more intimate, more inward. The kind of snow that makes you want to stay where you are. I didn't want to stay where I was. I wanted to be in her office. That was the first time the thought came to me like that, so directly. No disguise. I was in the work parking lot. Looking at the white sky, I thought, I want to be there. I don't want to talk about my mother or my ex-husband or I'm afraid of growing old alone. I want to be in that room, specific with that specific woman and the smell of lavender or eucalyptus or whatever, and I want her to look at me. The way she looks at me, and I want, what? I haven't finished my thought. In that afternoon's session, there was something in the air from the very beginning. She was different too, not in a way that I could tell. To point out but noticeable to me that 6 had passed. Weeks learning to read the subtle variations in her mannerisms. Of being in this world. In the middle of the session, I was talking about loneliness. About waking up at 3 in the morning and reaching out to the side. The empty bed mirrored the reflection, and she asked, "Do you miss someone specific? Or is it the presence in?" And she must have seen something in my face because he also opened his mouth as if he were going to say something, and then she fell silent, and then her watch beeped softly, announcing the end of the session, and the moment broke in half. Like a dry branch. I think we left an interesting thread there for next week. "Come," she said, with a calmness that seemed a little more built taller than usual. I said yes. I left without looking at her as I said goodbye. I walked to the elevator with my heart pounding in a way that I no longer knew how to pretend I didn't know. In the 8th week, I arrived at the doctor's office and she wasn't there. Alone. There was a woman in the waiting room, mostly middle-aged. Green, looking at her cell phone. And when the doctor's office door, it opened ahead of schedule, and I saw someone leaving through the crack. Another patient. Of course, obviously. But there was something in the scene. Ellen greeting this other woman. A person with a smile, that same smile, her hand, lightly touching the other patient's arm in a gesture of a natural farewell, which made me stop in the middle of the hallway. A small, ugly thought crossed my mind before. That I could stop him. She does this to everyone. Of course she does. It was her job. It was what she did. That's what I was paying to receive. I entered the session feeling unwell, and I couldn't hide it. "Are you okay?" she asked right at the beginning, before I could opened his mouth. "Yes," I said, very quickly. She didn't push. She waited, and when it became clear that I wasn't going to start alone, she said slowly. Sometimes what brings us to therapy is what we needing to work are different things. And sometimes they meet in ways we didn't expect. "I think I got confused," I said. And my voice came out differently than I planned. Smaller split in the middle. "I think I came here to work on something and ended up. The decision is always yours. You're the grown-up thing. The sensible thing." I was confused. I was alone. I had transferred some unresolved emotional need for a woman who treated me kindly in the context of a doctor's office. It was therapeutic, and she did it because she was paid to do it. All of that was true. I repeated it to myself like a mantra. But the truth didn't fill the void. Grace understood. Grace always understood. "Have you stopped going to therapy?" she asked on the phone. On a Monday night when I had replied. Monosyllabic to everything she said. For now. At night, the nightmares returned. Not the old ones, those were new ones. In them, I was always in the hallway of a place that I didn't recognize it, looking for a specific door, knowing that on the other side there was something important, but never managing to arrive. I would wake up with a heavy chest and the irrational certainty that I had left something behind. On a Sunday morning, with coffee in hand and snow on the side of outside, I opened a diary I hadn't used in years and wrote. The first thing that came to mind was, I'm 35 years old and I miss someone who barely knows me. But January had arrived with that particular energy of the start of the year makes us say yes to things that I would normally say no. Or maybe I was trying to force myself back into the world. The event was on a Saturday morning. I went by subway. Snow, starting over on the path. The hotel was beautiful in a corporate way, marble, light. Indirect, that studied silence of places where people pay to feel important. I put on my badge, grabbed my coffee, and found a spot near the window. where I could see the street outside and exist on the outskirts of the event without needing to be absorbed by it. I stayed like that for about 20 minutes, looking at Lakeshore. Driveway covered in snow, thinking about the diary in my drawer. Fourth, thinking about the phrase I hadn't deleted. And then someone passed through my field of vision, a navy blue blazer. I froze. No, it wasn't possible. Chicago was enormous. There were millions of blue blazers in the world. I was looking where there weren't any. But the hair. The way she walked. That quality of being. Completely within each step. I turned my head slowly, my heart beating calmly. Deceptive like before a fall. It was her. Ellen Marsh was on the other side of the room in profile speaking. With someone, holding their own cup with both hands. Alive, real, outside the office in the same space as me. For some reason that I didn't ask for and didn't plan for. My body decided before my mind. I didn't move, but I didn't look away either. She saw me. It was a fraction of a second. She was sweeping the hall with. His eyes darted distractedly, and then stopped. Exactly where? I was there, and the recognition slowly crossed her face. Too casual to be taken lightly. She said something brief to the person she was with, and walked towards me. My entire chest rearranged itself. Soon. Because there was no office surrounding it. There was no gold wristwatch, controlling time. There was only her and me and the snow on the other side. Outside the window and that space of air between us that it seemed heavy. Ellen, I said, and it was the first time I'd ever said her name. She said it out loud. She stood there for a moment, seemingly assessing something. Then he said, "How are you?" Hands for a second. But I want you to know that what happened in our sessions was real. The work was real. What you're going through is real. A pause. And that sometimes therapy opens doors that we didn't expect. That's part of it. The search and what you found are the same thing. Only with different name. That he needed to hit without trying to adjust the rhythm. 2 minutes later, she was by my side. He said nothing. He kept looking out the window too. Shoulders. 30 centimeters from me. A scent I knew by heart. You left without saying goodbye. She said, very quietly too. Window, as if it wasn't exactly for me. I know. It was full of people who weren't like us. I should tell you. She said, still looking out the window. That there is a protocol, there is an ethic, which is why what happened in a doctor's office should stay in the doctor's office. With all the disorder in life and the thing without, name that appears in the space between two people when something, there is a true truth between them. I don't know what to do with this, she said, and there was in that. That phrase revealed a vulnerability I had never heard from her before. Me neither, I said. And that was enough. Nothing dramatic happened. She didn't touch me. I didn't. I moved. We stood there, side by side, gazing at the same winter. Out there, carrying the same I-dawn single quotes T-no dash. What dash to dash do with the same silent seriousness. But there was something between us that now existed in a way. Declared, unresolved, not simple, not secure, real. When the event ended, we exchanged numbers without ceremony, like two adults who were trying to be responsible. Out of sheer honesty. She said that, ethically, no. She could continue being my therapist. I said that you knew, and then she left down the hotel's marble corridor. And I stood there watching her disappear with her number on cell phone and the snow outside and the strange, clear feeling that some things come to us without asking permission, without an appointment, without entering through the place he left it open. Some things get in through the crack. And when they enter like that, quiet, unexpected, nameless, these are the ones that remain. If this story resonated with you, leave a like now. It's the only way I know you were here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. There's much more. More to come. Much more. The next video that will appear on the screen now is about a woman who spent 10 years believing she was happy until that a solo trip to another state did everything she believed about herself falling apart at 48 hours. You won't want to miss this. Trust me.